Welcome back to season 5 of the BestWorst39 podcast. I'm your host, Josh Liaw. Super excited to get this season kicked off with my first guest. He's the general manager for performance racing industry and the co-founder and board member for Formula Drift. He was actually able to take what was an unknown sport called drifting and introduce it to the world from Japan. And obviously, I grew up with drifting becoming a big part of kind of media and popular culture. And so it's just super exciting to get a chance to hear his story. And in 2003, he co-founded Formula Drift in Long Beach, California, which is now the premier drifting championship of the world. Welcome, Jim Liaw.
Hey, how are you, Josh?
I'm good. Thanks for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So, just to disclose to everybody, Jim's out of Huntington Beach, California, which is, we're homeboys because we're both Southern California kids. I'm sure we grew up and kind of went in different paths, but I'm getting to know you for the first time here. So, let's just start off at kind of your current role and what you're doing in motorsports.
Sure. The performance racing industry started off about 35 years ago as a trade industry magazine, right? Like a business-to-business magazine serving the racing world and the motorsport space. And it obviously grew from there, added different genres, different disciplines of racing. And what spawned from that was the trade show. It's hopped around in different places, but we've kind of found our home in Indianapolis. So every December in Indianapolis is a big PRI show, which, like any other trade show, it's all things motorsport. So whether you are a race team or you are a part maker, a race series, a racetrack, it's a place where you do business and you interact and you come together. It's December, so it's the end of, almost everybody's seasons. And it's a great place to gather. And that's kind of the core of the business, right? We have the trade show. We have a monthly magazine that serves the industry. And the last few years, coming through the pandemic and trying to come out of the pandemic, is a drive for a new initiative, which is membership. So, what that is like a lot of organizations that a person, believes in, whether you believe in, clean oceans or rescuing, pets from kill shelters or whatever it is. There's some emotional support or some advocacy, some cause that drives you. Our membership is centered around two parts. One is that, which is you want to protect all things racing. You want to find ways that, lobby government efforts to restrict or eliminate forms of racing, even at the grassroots level. We want to find ways to support venues from staying open, and, because they are kind of the core of the business. Without racetracks, there's no racing. And that's part of the advocacy side, the emotional draw of our membership. And then there's obviously the pragmatic benefits. We're building that program. It's new. It's a new initiative, like I mentioned. And we want to offer benefits for our members and those and trying to grow that membership base. So me as general manager, I report to Dr. Jamie Meyer, which is the president of PRI. And I run currently our Southern California team, and that comprises of our trade show team, which produces the trade show, our magazine and content team, which puts out the magazine and other, social media content, things like that. And then our art department, which, does all the creative that surrounds that. And then our membership team, which is growing, is out of our new building in Indianapolis. So we have a second home right there in the heart of Speedway, Indiana, which is across the street from the home of the Indy 500. And all of our partners, our venue, our convention center, people that we work with are there. So we're driving and creating a closer relationship to the city and people that we work with there. And the membership team is going to be housed there. So that's kind of my current role. I broadened my horizon to not just one genre of motorsports, but now being able to connect and network with a lot of different disciplines, different race series, and different people in the motorsports world.
Thank you for sharing that. It sounds to me like there's some real strong values-based decision-making around PRI and the work that you all do in protecting all forms of motorsports and really advocacy in that area, but also expanding membership. I'm kind of curious, you have a lot that you are kind of overseeing. I mean, I heard social media, I heard trade shows from California to Indianapolis. And so with such a complex organization, what is your approach to really providing leadership? I'm sure it's beyond management when you have such a broad range of responsibilities.
Sure. And I'd even expand on, and even to add to the complexity of that, okay. The PRI organization is now a subsidiary, a part of SEMA, and SEMA is the Specialty Equipment Market Association. They are a trade organization that serves all things automotive aftermarket, everything from the car maker that is looking to connect with accessorizers and part makers and enthusiasts that simply just want to, modify their cars for show and for go, all the way to all forms of the industry, from if you're a body shop and the paint that you purchase, or alignment equipment, to new wheels for your car, tires, performance parts, etc. Old cars, new cars, Japanese, European, domestic, all are housed under the umbrella. And then we are kind of your specialized arm of that focuses on racing. To your question, there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of people. I feel like I've been pretty fortunate in my background that I've touched upon a lot of those areas, both in Formula Drift, but even prior to that. But it's, at the end of the day with any organization, as cliche as it is, it's a team. So if it's being that it's a team, it's a people business. It's about interacting with those that attend the show, that are becoming members of this organization, but also those that work within the organization, and finding ways to communicate. Really, at the end of the day, it's tricky, right? Like, been doing, like, with my wife, a lot of these like personality profiles, sometimes for fun, and trying to be proactive too, right? Because you want to understand yourself, and you want to understand each other to better communicate. And I find that very similar to the workplace. People communicate differently. People are everybody's different. So you can't expect everyone to communicate the same way you do, or to do things the same way you do, and to, bridging that gap, and kind of translating things, I think is more of my actual role than actually, doing the, that's more important than the reporting and the strategizing part of the job.
It's so interesting that you kind of frame it up in that sense. I actually was talking to one of my mentors who was in town a couple of weeks ago at dinner, and he does just full-time consulting for leadership, and he does it with a lot of different industries. And in the end, what I've distilled from what he shared, and really, really aligns with what you're sharing, is you're in the people business. This idea of communication, understanding that, different people have different needs, and how to move and motivate and encourage people towards a particular mission. And that's just a great leadership lesson that makes sense as to why you're working at such a high level with such a large level of responsibility. Now, I'm curious about how you got into this role. I know you've been doing this for a long time. So would you mind kind of giving us an idea of your journey to this role?
Yeah, I at the end of it all, I feel that I am just, I'm fortunate with the opportunity, and I guess, to self reflect some, I guess, stubbornness or persistence on my part, coupled with those, fortunate opportunities. So yeah, I went to UCLA as a economics major, and that's you know, just blind on my part, immaturity on my part. I thought economics and business were one and the same. I found out really quickly it's not. Uh, I was just kind of struggling, and I didn't really like what I was learning. Um, at that time, UCLA, they just introduced what was a minor or emphasis, which was Asian American Studies, and they introduced that as a major. And so I said, well, look, I might as well be one of the, I think it might have been the first or second year they had the program. So it's like, well, I've been liking these courses I've been taking. I feel kind of enriched by it, connected to it, and I went and pursued that as my BA. But again, like as I'm about to graduate, I'm like, what am I going to do with this degree? I don't really want to continue and try and be a teacher or a professor or something. And as much as I really admire people that do community work, that wasn't kind of my calling. I didn't see myself doing that. And but I love cars. I've always loved cars. I love cars in high school. All my friends were doing things in their garages. I wasn't allowed to so much, but I hung around with a lot of people that did. And the car scene was Southern California, right? Super vibrant, and I was surrounded by that. So I've always loved cars, and so I just started picking up the phone. The career center at that time, technology at that time, just wasn't as accessible as it is now. And so you kind of have to just, get off your butt and just call and write letters and whatever. And so I did, and I called every company that I found that was based in Southern California, and I was asking for internships. At that time, Nissan, Honda, Mazda, Ford, there's a branch of Ford, Toyota, were all in Southern California. I called companies that I knew. I called, magazines, Car and Driver, and Motor Trend, and everybody I saw on the newsstand. I would call them to see what was available, and in most cases there wasn't, or if they didn't have a direct program with the university, there wasn't anything there, except for one enthusiast magazine or a publisher called McMullen Argus. They printed two magazines I really loved, which is Sport Compact Car, which dealt with a lot of import cars, and European Car, which is like modified European cars. And the operator just happened to patch me into the vice president of sales. And he's like, what are you calling about? The operator said there was an internship opportunity. It's like, okay, we were just about to post it, and I guess she knew about it. It's like, okay, let's set up an interview and come down. And that was the door that opened. And it was like, Pandora's box, or, maybe a better analogy, but it just opened the door to this world that I knew nothing about, right? I love cars, but I knew nothing about the business of cars, parts, distribution, everything, magazine, marketing, publishing, none of that. And that essentially got me in there. I worked as an intern crunching numbers and just kind of running errands, doing all that, but I learned a lot. And when I graduated, they offered me, a starting position as, a salesperson, and I was selling kind of little classified ads and all that went into the back of the magazine. But I got to interact with companies. I got to go to shows. I got to go to races to try to draw up more business. So, those years in in the publishing, in the magazine business. Took me to the event world. I started going to events. That's where I met a lot of event producers, and I thought that was super dynamic. I was young. I loved the how vibrant events were, and it was interested to travel more. After my period there, I went to a couple of different event companies. One was a import drag racing series. One was a car show producer. And I'm kind of like summarizing this because I'm dragging this out. But I met what would be my business partner, Ryan, at the last company I was at the car show producer. And we said, look, I think there's like a void here, because the show was really successful, but they weren't really taking care of their partners well. Companies would come in and they would display at the show, and they just didn't, maybe they weren't connecting. They didn't get good results, so they would leave. And we felt that there should have been better caretaking, hand-holding to retain. But I guess, the events were so successful that if one left, another one would come. Mm. And we didn't really, that didn't really vibe well with us. So we said, look, why don't we just try to start like a small marketing agency to service these companies that we know and to help them build a better presence. And that was the start of what we call Slipstream Global Marketing. That was our agency. And we started servicing, automotive related brands at events. And that was kind of our specialty. Formed a lot of great relationships. One of the best ones was with Mazda. And because we dealt with a lot of this, like, import Japanese performance industry, some of our contacts said, look, there's this, new kind of motorsport called drifting that is starting in Japan. It's been in the mountain roads, kind of like street racers with young people for a while, but they're finally taking it to racetracks and forming some type of discipline and competition, formal competition out of it. And the group that was organizing that, wants to take that event outside of the US. And they're looking for somebody, or outside of Japan to the US. They want to target the US market, and they want somebody to partner with them to help market and operate the event. So, we pitched it. We got, some good endorsements from some of the companies that we worked with. They chose us. We produced an event, the US event of the series called D1 Grand Prix. And that was in August of 2003. To everybody's surprise, full house. Companies loved it. We had a couple of US drivers participate in it. They loved it. They said, we need to do more. We need to have a permanent presence here. And when I say opportunity, it's like, yeah, we thought we like knocked it out of the park. And when we went back to the folks at D1 and said, how do we work with you, partner, license, whatever, what do we need to do? Let's create a US version. Let's franchise this. Let's create a US version of what you do in Japan here, and let us run it with you, with your, supervision, guidance, whatever you guys want to do. And surprisingly, it was a really quick response. It was no. It was a great event, but if we want to come back, we'll come back. We'll come back and we'll do another one. We'll call you. We'll do it again. But in terms of an ongoing presence, that's not what we have. Our vision for this, it doesn't include that. And we worked pretty hard on that project, and we didn't want it to let it go. So we said, okay, well, let's, agree to disagree. We think that it needs to happen and you don't want it to happen. So, out of courtesy, we're going to tell you we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And we're going to come up with a name, and we're just going to run it. And they said, all right, go for it. And so as kind of a branch of our Slipstream Global Marketing business, we created Formula Drift. And the first season was, we announced it at the SEMA show in November of 2003. We rounded up every contact that we have, every supporting racetrack, et cetera. And by May of 2004, we held our first of 4 rounds of that season, that first season, in Road Atlanta. And that was our, round 1, year 1 of Formula Drift was in Atlanta. And we started the series. We thought it would be one part of our portfolio of different projects and clients that we did. And within no more than 3 years, I was like, this is too much. Like, this is a full-time deal. Like, we can't be doing all these marketing projects and stuff on the side while trying to run the series. Because by that time, we went from 4 rounds in year 1, 6 in 2, and those 7 by year 3, with a bunch of other like demonstrations and things like that on the side. So that was 2007. And then, obviously we've grown the sport since then, a lot of things. And fast forward, 2023, this upcoming, or 2022, this upcoming season will be the 19th season of Formula Drift. Wow. And next year will be the 20th season. So a lot of people thought it was a fad, thought it was one of those trends that would last a few years. Definitely not 10, definitely not 15, definitely not 20. So we thought that was a pretty big accomplishment. We set the bar for that sport globally in terms of professionalism, in terms of safety, in terms of the social media reach. I think out of all of the US based racing series, Formula Drift has the highest, second highest social media profile, second to NASCAR. It just means that we found a way to connect with young, engaging people, and that's the market that drifting serves. And then the series kind of grew and matured and blossomed, and I felt that it was time, but also it was a struggle for me for a while, for a few months, when this opportunity to move into this PRI role came. Obviously, one, I didn't want to leave what was a good thing, but at the same time, my business partner is still there. He was his title wasn't president, but we were like partners. We were co-presidents, and the team is so dialed in that the sport is in great hands. And obviously, I still serve on the board. I check in with the guys, once in a while. But it's one of those where, I guess in leadership and business building, like, it's actually a good thing, right? When you leave something in a good place, and when you walk away and it continues to grow, which it is. This upcoming season is going to be really good. So I felt good about it. So it's like, bittersweet, but this whole new world that I've been dabbling in as Formula Drift, going to the SEMA show, going to the PRI show, now being able to be on this side, hopefully I can bring a lot of the lessons that I learned in that world, and bring it to a broader motorsports world, while also learning and seeing and collaborating with new people in all forms of motorsports. Again, just because I love cars, and ultimately to serve and to grow the industry.
Well, it seems like you're uniquely positioned to be able to do that in your new role, considering you have just a ton of experience in really bringing this forward. When I was listening to you tell your story, it just reminds me of some other really interesting career stories of people who didn't necessarily have it all laid out for their lives, but just one opportunity led to another. I mean, the idea that you went and chose you switched from economics after you were disappointed in finding out what that all entailed into something that was more interesting, but didn't necessarily have a job prospect that matched up with you, really opened you up to explore some other things. And something else you said really stood out to me was, earlier you said something about persistence and maybe stubbornness, which I love those characteristics. The people for anybody from my mother to I don't know, mentors, the people I really admire are people who who just outlast people, right? They just outlast things. They outlast problems. They have just this stubbornness. And I also kind of was chuckling a little bit because when you talked about writing letters, and I mean, there's probably some younger people listening to this who are like, why would you write a letter? But yeah, right. We back in the day, we wrote letters and stamps, and we had to call everybody. There was no Google to look up companies to find internships. Career centers, I'm certain, didn't have that technology at that time. And the one person, it's almost serendipitous how that one operator gets you to that VP, the perfect person to get you connected, which opened your mind up to a whole new set of learning of things you just had no clue about, and really expanded. And now you're just at the center of this motorsport world, which is, again, you just follow that line. I don't think someone would predict who you were at point A to where you are right now at point L or M of your life, or whatever you are in your life. And that's pretty amazing. So thanks for sharing that. I want to kind of jump into your background as far as kind of your upbringing, where you grew up, whatever you're comfortable sharing, but I'd love to know a little bit about your background.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what, you're right about lasting. Like I remember back to all the different ups and downs of every these struggles where it's like there's people that want to compete, and some in a healthy way and some not so healthy, and to be able to kind of outlast that is really good. And it's I talk about like being fortunate, because you go back to people like this VP of sales that hired me, that brought me on, is still in the industry. He plays a senior role with a racing series in that organization, both domestically and globally, and we're still in contact. And I still say this is all your fault. This is all your fault that this is all happening. I feel I feel good that that this small kind of motorsports world, we're still connected. So I mean, background, so my family immigrated here when I was 6 from Taiwan, and I came, I think, I started first grade here, and I grew up, like ESL class, not knowing English. I was in my elementary school, I was like only one of 4 like Asians in the entire school. And so it was a pretty steep learning curve, a lot of TV, a lot of just, like you're in it. Right. So, and that first year we lived in Rolling Heights, which is, maybe like 40 minutes east of downtown LA. And then we moved to the neighboring city of Diamond Bar the year after. So from second grade on, I lived and grew up in Diamond Bar. I went to elementary school there, middle school. I graduated from Diamond Bar High School, which ironically, where I used to live is on the other side of the freeway from SEMA. Nice. And I always tell the SEMA folks when I go there, it's like, you see over there across that hillside down that way, that's where I grew up. So it's what a interesting coincidence, right? And after I graduated, like I was telling you, I thought business would be cool to get into. I was also into architecture. So I keep going back to these paths in the road, right? Like I got into a few different schools. I wanted to go out of state. It was way too costly to go out of state. So looking at like in-state options, and, stubborn me, it's like, well, I can go do architecture at Cal Poly Pomona, which is, a less than 15-minute drive from my house. Or I can, go to UCLA and go do, economics. And it's like, I really love architecture, but man, like that's way too close to home. What a silly kind of immature thing to like think about. But hey, these things happen for a reason, right? So, I went to UCLA, and then we talked about. I was there for a little over 4 years, and met some great friends there, and graduated and got into into the media world. And I think about like some of these like some of these, I guess, missteps that turn into opportunity. And I always think about, and I drew a blank for a second, but I thought back to what you're saying about like, we were talking about persistence. Is I feel like there's a little bit of like a connection when young people are into cars, and there's this drive of STEM education, and there is this trying to create opportunity for young people, especially underrepresented young people. And we've been Formula Drift was doing a lot of work with different groups, and we bring students out, and SEMA and PRI do it too. We bring student groups out to see this world, because people think of, you want to get into cars, I'm wrenching on a car, but there's so many other opportunities. And I think back to, younger me, is like, there's not always a linear path. And to help let young people understand that you can get to your goal, you can get to, where you want to get to, but it doesn't always have to be the same path as the next person. You don't have to, go jump into a 4-year university right away. You don't have to go to university right away. You can go to, trade school. You can learn a trade. You can go to like some tech school. You can work for a few years, and until you're, mentally mature or financially in a better place to then tackle, like there's all kinds of things. And to open your mind to say, for me, it wasn't premeditated. I just was, I guess calling was premeditated, but it wasn't premeditated in the sense that I knew that there was a whole world of opportunity here. But, for a young person, like, I love cars, but you know what? I'm really good at whatever, web design or coding. Well, that doesn't mean that car related businesses don't need people like that. Mm-hmm. They do. And so you can do something that you're good at in an industry that you like, that doesn't have to be what people generalize it to be. Hey, you love cars, you have to work on a car. It's so much more than that. So yeah, I feel drawn to that. And I think in like, I kind of skimmed through like background, but I feel like there's so many different little like snippets of stories, depending on, what people want to talk about, that I think I can relate to, in terms of, maybe the persistence part, or like lessons that you look back, hindsight, a lot of times, like, kids and their parents, they don't necessarily like, my parents, they're annoying or whatever. Like, I don't see eye to eye with them, and we bicker or we debate or whatever it is all the time. But, as a, first generation immigrant family, and just seeing the, my parents had a pretty, kind of upper middle class life and thriving careers and businesses in Taiwan when they left. And I always think, I talk to them once in a while about it. And I think that's like, why would you leave? Yeah. Like, why would you leave? And seeing like where, probably for a good decade, where my dad was still kind of like finding his way. He's he's an entrepreneur as well. So he was finding different things to do. And so I guess that kept his like, his mind, his passion kind of going, but it wasn't always easy. And, I think back to like, days of, we owned a donut shop for like a year. And this was when, I was like first or second grade. And so, they're open, they have to get there at like 3 a.m. Start, there were some people that worked with them. It wasn't just them, luckily, but they're there and they're baking and they're prepping. And on certain days, like whether we have like on spring break or whatever it is that I'm off, but the store is open, you know, this is the 80s, right? So it's like they just put me in the car and I wake up, I'm sleeping in the car, I wake up, 6, 7 a.m. It's like, oh, they're inside. and I go into the store. And I just remember that song, man, that was hard, like it wasn't easy for me. And I'm sleeping. So I think about stuff like that and just, it just, you learn a lot from that.
Yeah. Your dad's kind of hustler spirit and kind of entrepreneur spirit. I guess I was a part of a business commission here in St. Louis where we kind of like the term hustler, even if some people has a negative connotation. It's like someone who just has that energy around trying to figure out how to create, how to build something that others want, and is energized by that. And I can see that. I'm sure that you kind of somehow got a little bit of that in you as well. I also the idea of like the 80s of waking up in the car and, times being just different, right? Like while your parents had to be up, because your parents had to be up, or they had to be the first ones up there and getting things going. And I could just really value that. Coming from an immigrant, first generation kind of family as well, it's the hard work and the grind. And there's something about, there's, I'm sure, Taiwan's, I'm sure there's some special memories there for your folks there. And, for my family back in Uganda, but there's something about parenting an opportunity here for you to really kind of create whatever life you want to create if given the right opportunities. But I think it goes back to what we kind of both agree on, which is this idea of persistence, and I can really value that. Well, something else you said that really stands out is it's not always a linear path for goals. Essentially, that's kind of how I summarized it. But so like, there's no two people who get to a particular goal in the same route. And I think that sometimes people do get confused around seeing how somebody else has achieved success in their respective career or lives. And they get thrown off by this idea that, oh, well, I have to do it their way, even if their way doesn't match up with my interests or needs. And it's true. It's like, I think having a bigger vision of what you want in your life, or being open to exploring what you're interested in, and then finding your own path in that direction, as long as you stay focused on the path, is really important. And hopefully that gives people some ease. All right. So Jim, we're going to take a real quick pause, and then we're going to actually get into the big question. All right. So as you know, this podcast is called The Best Worst Thing. And for those who are joining us for the first time, this is the part where I ask our guests to share a story, whether it's personal or professional, of a setback. And so this part has really three parts. It's what was the thing that was difficult that happened? How did you get through it? And what were the lessons you learned along the way that you want to pass on to listeners? So it's the what, the how, and the what. And so Jim Liaw, what was your best worst thing?
Okay. All right. Let me see how quickly I can scan back. I talked about how Formula Drift was started, but that was a pretty simple explanation, right? Like, hey, the company that we worked with in Japan didn't want to work with us or extend the franchise or whatever. And because of that kind of rejection, we created our own series, our brand that, fortunately, blossomed into this whole thing 19 years later. But I would say that time, those like first couple of years was really challenging, was really difficult, because not only did that organization turn down our proposal to do that, but once we started, not only were we dealing with just the struggles of starting a business, right? Like, I would wake up, cold sweat at night sometimes because some company was late paying us and I'm stressed because I have to use those funds to pay other things. And I don't want to be late paying people or paying our vendors, but our vendor, our sponsor, is late paying us. So there were a lot of those kind of I would say kind of stereotypical general challenges that were very taxing at times. But I think what was really hard was that then that Japanese organization and others in the U.S. started to create basically purposely to make our lives difficult. Things like we had built that event website, that D1GP, USA website. We designed a US version of that logo. We did a lot of those things, and we were young. We didn't have a lot of leverage, and I felt we were, I hate to use the word bully, but we were definitely leveraged to, hey, you don't have, you're not producing the event anymore. You need to give that back with no compensation, give that back. And then at the same time, within a year later, suddenly, they were partnering with another group to try to, compete with us. And there were just, it just didn't, it was really hard because it's like, you want to just, do business, right? And the struggles of money, and will people buy tickets, and that's part of it. Like that I feel like I can accept, right? And even competing in the sense of, hey, somebody has an event, you have an event, who's going to outmarket, outsell. That's all natural competition. But when there is malicious and strategically malicious attempt, it was really it kind of ate away, and it took a lot of the what should have been really fun and exciting like times away. And I felt like I kind of held my breath for like 2 years. Wow. Until we were able to get past that. And I remember the first couple of seasons, friends, family, people in the industry would look at myself and when, my partner, Ryan, hey, look, the stands are full. This is great. Like that was a good event. And it was always like, oh yes, thank you. Like very, held back, very withdrawn. I don't think it was until, the third season, at the end of the third season, because one of our rounds was at a place called Irwindale Speedway, and that was where that D1 event was held. And and I think the drive, our internal drive, we didn't say it a lot, is that we had X amount of people at that D1 event, and the first year we didn't get that same number. The second year we didn't get that same number, and in the third year we surpassed that. And so it was like we kind of looked at each other like, okay. We kind of got this like monkey off our back. We got this, we kind of came out from under the shadow of, this just kind of looming over us. So I wouldn't say it's like a moment, but it was like this like lingering, like bad, not so fun, always like wet blanket on our business, for a couple of years. And to finally get out of that, I felt like it was like, weight was off. Now we can charge, right? We don't have, the whatever was restricting us is off. Now it's on our own and the world. And it's like, we're just going to fight whatever, obstacles are out there. And it was like this kind of new energy to say, all right, we've got that a little bit over with, and let's just forge ahead. Sure, there'll be competitors, and we have to, deal with, 2008, 2009 recession, like all the craziness. We could do that because now we've kind of gotten at least that, off our backs. And it's almost like 2007, 2008 was like a fresh start.
Yeah, yeah, that to me, I got pumped kind of listening to you tell that story because, you know, I mean, and I think a lot of people can relate with their version of this in their industries. It could be, politics in the workplace, or it could be literal politics, um, where you're all you want to do is do good, right? You're just trying to put this thing together. You're trying to get this dream, this idea off the ground, and seemingly, you thought, well, okay, we've cleared it, we've done it, did everything we could to make sure that this was okay, and have people intentionally try to get in your way and disrupt your progress. I've found myself in that position professionally, mostly, where and sometimes personally, but professionally, my initial thought usually is like, well, why? Why would you just not live and let live? Right? We're just trying to get this thing, just get out of our way. And that could be pretty frustrating. So like you said, holding your breath for 2 years, kind of holding my breath in that store, waiting for the breakthrough, which was incredible, which is, of course, is 2003 when you finally surpassed them. And I think like that's like a rocky moment or something. That's like, okay. And now you can take the wet blanket off. Now you're like, okay, now like I'm listen, it's not like you're saying you want it easy. It's not like you're saying, you and your partner Ryan are naive and we're saying there's never going to be any struggles. We're just going to have it easy. I mean, you were prepared to take on any normal fight and any normal struggle that any new venture has to take on, but it's those ones that are contrived that people put together that get in your way. And so, again, outlasting them, right? That's the theme of this podcast today with you. And it's like, right? Be persistent, outlast them, be stubborn.
Compete to compete, right? Like, whether you're in a large corporation or whatever, it's like, just compete to compete. Like when people are, purposely malicious, that's a downer, like that doesn't feel good because it makes you want to, kind of, do that back. And it's like, it's draining because you're kind of fighting yourself too. It's like, oh yeah, you want to, tit for tat. Like, yeah, we could do that too. But like, that's not where you want to be. That's not where you want to go. That's not how you want to, you as a person, you don't want your company to be like, you just don't want to do that. So it was hard.
Yeah, that's definitely not where you want to spend your energy. You want to spend your energy towards creativity, towards everything that's going to uphold and push forward and advance your efforts, energy in your company or whatever creative endeavor that you're doing. And that sounds like that's what you did, which I think is really probably another lesson to take away too, which is, when all this stuff is swirling around, you kind of staying focused on the mission, and being able to push forward and in that. And I think that's really, really a cool lesson to take away.
I was kind of sharing with you, like, I feel kind of connected with trying to, whenever there's an opportunity to speak to students about, paths and different, be open-minded to look at options and things like that. I also am very like sensitive and cognizant to, quote unquote, like older generation kind of talk down to younger generation, right? Like a lot of like, hey, you kids don't know, you don't know yet, like that type of stuff. I take a lot of like sensitivity to that because I always think back where, as one gets older in their career, in their life, in their whatever, don't forget that you were that young person once. Because during that time, during those 2 years, or in the beginning of that, I remember one representative in the U.S. for that that was representing or trying to represent the D1 organization came to us and said, kind of gave us this lecture, about like, hey, you're early in your business, you're this and that, and I distinctly remember him like, there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's like you're in the middle, so don't, basically trying to, I felt very like it was very condescending to be like, you're just at the beginning of something. So don't hold on to those assets that you created. Just let them go and give them up. Don't fight this fight. You have a long, career ahead of you. You don't need to fight this fight. And it's like, man, like I look back and think about like just, that person saying, it's like, oh, I don't ever want to be that guy trying to talk to some young person and just being so, condescending and having, a negative assumption of what that person knows and doesn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's words of wise. I think I noticed every generation gets it. Our generation, we were the slackers, right? We were the latchkey kids, and people talked a lot of smack. And then I noticed people in our generation, as we got older, on Facebook starting to post messages about millennials, and you just notice this every generation will kind of repeats the same pattern for the generation after them. And I think bring up a good point. Like if you remember who you were then, there's a lot of energy in you. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of creativity. We should be supporting that and praising that and really encouraging that in positive ways.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. Hey, so Jim, what's the best way people can find you on social media? What's the best way they can kind of keep up with you in the work that you're doing?
I'm on Facebook, not so much these days, but I thrive on my generation, which is Instagram. It's really simple, Jim Liaw. I think a lot of people have turned my first last name into one name. So JIMLIAW. I try to balance it out. There's a lot of like family stuff, my kids, my wife. But so we'll get some inside look at car stuff as well.
Very cool. Well, thank you for coming on, Jim.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Best Worst Thing podcast. I'm your host, Josh Liaw. Music is produced by Josh One. You can follow him at Boomnote on Instagram and Twitter, and Josh One on Spotify. Our episodes are edited by Cool Jets Audio and Visual. You can follow them at Cool Jets AV on Instagram. Our marketing is designed by Francesca Daniels. You can find her at FrankandKitty24 on Instagram. And our overall design is by Inspired Design with Ryan Daniels. You can find them at getinspired.design on Instagram. Thank you for listening to The Best Worst Thing.
This one's for the good times and this one's for the bad. This one's for the day that was the best we ever had. This one's for my good friends and this one's for my foes. The ones who get up on your skin and do not even know.